Hello, I just wanted to make a quick response video since we've been kind of having an online dialogue, and I think it's just easier to do it on here since like typed responses are, you have limited characters. But yeah, of course, I was going to disagree with your video. The biggest obstacle to democracy in the Middle East. In your video, you said the biggest obstacle to democracy in the Middle East is the United States government. I clearly disagree with that, and the reason I disagree with that is because I don't disagree with any of the historical facts that you said in the video. I completely agree with them. I give you that those totally happened. What I disagree with is the context in which you tell this narrative of these facts, and the reason that I disagree with it is because it totally disregards and ignores very important key facts that if we're in the video would completely change your entire narrative. The first of which is that, your perspective kind of is that the United States is this continuous being that has existed since the 1700s, which you don't really go that far in your video. You just go, with you tell the story in the context of the United States history with the Middle East, but you can't just simply do that. You have to start out with how our country, because this is a democracy, we've been here since the 1700s, you have to kind of start with that and go forward. Is that the United States, because we are run the way that we are run, our government changes every 4 to 8 years. Every country, that may not be so, but our country is like that. So in that regard, you seem to look at the United States history with the Middle East as this continuous relationship or situation, when that is not in fact the case at all. Each administration had a different way of running and a different way of doing things. You cannot blame the previous administration you can only blame them for their own actions. You can't blame them for the previous administration's policies. You simply can't. It's kind of absurd, because then how far back do you take that? Do you take that back to the founding of this country, of the United States, becoming democracy? So the fact that you kind of all talk about these historic facts and then just bam, Obama, like it's the Obama administration's fault. Well, no, Obama has been in power for 2 years, so you cannot blame him for the things that have been happening in the Middle East because he wasn't in power. If you're going to blame him for all of that stuff, then is he also de facto, with the founding of the United States, we had slavery. So is Obama now also guilty of slaves, being someone who's not, white himself in America? That doesn't really make sense. You have to put things into context. And with the Obama administration has done a very good job in attempting to correct the mistakes of the past. Now, is that stuff going to be done overnight? No, not at all. Is it going to be something that's even going to be completed in his administration, even if he has, 2 terms, which is the 8 full years? No. Can he do a lot of work? Yeah, he does. And I think one of the biggest things is that his insistence that we look for alternative forms of energy. That would solve a lot of our problems with our relationship with the Middle East, because we are dependent on oil, which has become a really big problem. It has been a problem, it's become a recent problem for American citizens, but it's been a big problem for people in the Middle East since this situation has been going on. But, the issue with that is, when you put things into context, yes, the United States has done lots of horrible things to other countries, but the United States is not unique in that aspect. Every single country has done horrible things to other countries. The difference is that the United States simply, quite frankly, did it better and became a world power. Other countries can't really say that, and you can't blame the United States for using their power to watch out for their own people. Now, in the modern age, do I agree with the things that the United States is doing? Most certainly not. We need to stop the shit that we used to be doing in order to make a much more democratic world, a much more fair world, more a world where the economics are more equal and favorable for as many people as possible. But don't be naive in thinking that the world was always like this and this was a value that the world has always had. That is not so. Each country was in it for themselves, and the United States was in it for itself, just like Egypt was. And Egypt has a history of its own violence against other cultures and subjugating and exploiting other cultures. Look at you have proof. You have the pyramids. The pyramids are still in Egypt. That was not paid labor. Those were, built by slaves. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that the United States is some kind of this demonic evil power that just has run amok in the world. Because your video doesn't even address any of Europe or Canada. These are silent partners in all of this. These are all the U.S. allies. Why? Because they benefit from everything that the United States has done and is currently doing. They can more easily take the moral high ground because they're not doing it directly. They're simply supporting it, and that's just the way it is. Now, I completely support Egypt and any Middle Eastern country, any country in the world that wants to form a democracy and become part of the world system, and be able to participate in their government and elect their own leaders in a democratic style and have a peaceful, more just society where human rights are spread. I'm all about that. But the thing that I think is honestly the biggest threat to countries that want to do that is not the United States government, but anti-American sentiment. And the reason I say that is because if you're going to become part of the modern world and build up a country, well, you have to play by the rules. And the rules are already in play, regardless of whether or not you agree with what the rules are. The rules are there, the rules are in play. And if you want a prosperous society, then you have to play by the rules. And if you're going to think that, okay, Egypt's going to become a democracy and we're going to have this anti-American sentiment and we're going to be able to prosper, then the only person you're fooling is yourself and the other people that, are watching your YouTube channel and agree with you. But that's not going to happen at all. If Egypt wants to be a successful democracy, they're going to have to be friends with the United States. I was just recently looking up their GDP. They're number 40, 41 on the list. So let's say tomorrow, you become Egypt, not you, Egypt, I don't know where you live, but Egypt becomes a democracy. Well, what are they going to do to be able to support their people economically? Who are you going to turn to in order to build up your country, industrialize it, make sure that there's jobs for people, that sort of thing? Where do you plan on getting this money from? If you don't plan on participating with the United States economically. Because the United States has all the money. You're not going to give me a good answer because you're not going to be able to support Egypt is not going to be able to support itself if it's not going to partner with the United States and play the game, the economic game with the United States and become part of the system. And that's just how it is. That's just the way the current situation of the world. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that indefinitely from to the end of time. But right now, the United States is the world's biggest economy. And any country that's not going to play by its economic rules is not going to make it. And so you can't have Egypt elect a whole bunch of anti-American people, because then how are you going to deal in business with us? How are you going to take care of your people? Where are you going to get that money from? Egypt doesn't have money. The money that, as your video mentioned, the money that a lot of the money that it gets comes from the United States. So that's why I'm also confused in why there's been calls from people on YouTube. I haven't really heard this from opposition from, leaders. Not that there are many leaders in Egypt right now, but I haven't heard for this call for the cutting off of funds, because it wouldn't make sense to cut off funds when you want an intact government. You may not want the leaders that are in Egypt to be running the government, and you may not want the government to run the way that it is run, but one thing you do want is you want an intact government, and you want that government to be transitioned over to people that are democratically elected, but you don't want the government to fall apart. If you close off those channels, you don't want to end up like Iraq, where it's going to take you forever to rebuild a government. And let's face it, then, when in a situation like that, when you don't have political parties, when you don't have what kind of real election are you going to have when people are really not going to know who to vote for? You're not going to know who the leaders are. You're not going to know what they stand for. You're really just going to have a whole bunch of people starving and needing jobs and ready to take anyone who comes along and promises those things, which quite frankly, historically has always been the religious fanatics. And in Egypt's case, the most organized, which is always on the news, is the Muslim Brotherhood. And I'm not trying to demonize them or anything, but what I do know about them is that they are organized, and they're one of the only really organized groups. And they have called for, some things. They seem to me, as an outsider, a group that is trying to participate in the democratic process, but only by the means of trying to establish more power. And then once they get power, democracy would kind of go out of the window. But that's not up to me. That's up to the Egyptian people. So whatever they choose is fine with me. But as an American, I most certainly support my president in, number one, protecting American interests, because that's his job. Yeah, we want democracy in other countries, but he took an oath first and foremost to protect American interests. And as an American, he damn well better sure protect my interests over that of other countries. I'm for equal rights, and I'm for human rights, and I'm for freedoms, especially basic, human freedoms. Being a ethnic, religious, and sexual minority in my own country, I definitely understand, the power of democracy and the power to have, freedom and protection. But I'm also not naive in thinking that there are organizations and things in the world that totally want to destroy my way of life. I'm not ignorant of that. And so as a nation, we're definitely going to watch out for our interests. I just think the method of doing that doesn't have to be as bad as it has been in the past. I don't believe that it has to be as exploitive as it has been in the past. But I do think it's a complete farce to pretend like the United States is this evil country that has done all these horrible things. It has done horrible things to other countries, but they aren't alone in it. Every single country in this world, on this planet, has done horrible things to other countries, and I don't know why the United States has to take this overall blame for that, simply because we're the ones at the top. I guess it's easy for people at the bottom to kind of point to the person at the top and blame them for all the things that are bad in the world. But you have to look at Europe and all these other industrialized countries as well, that they are prosperous because of their shady past. Do they have to continue to do shady things? No, not at all. And I hope that none of us have to do that going forward. Or we can at least start changing the ways that we're behaving, as I believe the Obama administration is trying to do. But don't at all think that just because the people at the bottom are there, just because they're innocent victims. No, they've done horrible things in their history, in the history of their country as well. The United States is not, alone in that. So I really would hope that any countries that want to become a democracy kind of lose any kind of anti-American sentiment. And it's because also it's a little bit hypocritical, because part of the reason that these uprisings has been so successful is because of the United States. I mean, people are using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and, the internet, all of which are American inventions. Well, cell phones, all of that stuff are American. They may not be built in America, but we're the ones that came up with them. And it's so that's how democracy, the idea of democracy and the idea of freedom and the idea of social networking and all that stuff, especially in the digital age, those are totally American concepts. So it's a little bit hypocritical to blame the United States for all the evils in the world and then blame all these other countries for everything that's good or whatever. No, America isn't, has influenced the world in both ways. We've done bad things, but we've definitely done good things too. And what is Egypt trying to be? seriously, what is the vision of Egypt? Whatever you envision it to be, when you envision it to be a democracy, I'm pretty sure within that vision you're envisioning people having jobs and products and services similar to that of the United States. You're not expecting them to live in the Stone Age for forever. Not that they live in the Stone Age now; they're a pretty modern society. But you get what I'm saying is that they're gonna want their iPhones and iPads and new computers and new cars just like everyone else, and that's part of modernization. That's part of the American influence that we're also spreading. So it's not just bad things that America does, it's good things that America does too. But that's all. This video went far longer than I expected it to, but that's just my little take on that.